Hello and welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Lead with a Vision. I'm your host, Vihaan Easwar. Lead with a Vision is a weekly series in which we discuss one aspect of leadership skills and how it can help you in the real world. Today's episode, we'll be discussing public speaking. We have an amazing guest speaker planned for you today, so be sure to stay tuned. And now I would like to call upon Leo Ojachitness to say a few words. I think you're on mute.
I was muted there. Thank you so much, Leo Vihaan, and thank you so much for joining us. Our guest, who I'll give Vihaan the pleasure of introducing. I'll be very brief today. I know that we have a very engaging session, and I wouldn't want to take away time from that. Basically, what I'm doing here today as our leadership chair in our club is I once again like to welcome you all. Thank you for coming out for the 14th episode of Lead with a Vision. It's hard to believe it's been so long. We started this last year, and we're looking forward to continuing it into this year, making it better than ever. This project really started out in sort of that COVID mindset that unfortunately, our Leos couldn't go out to do their projects, that people want to get their hands dirty, want to get into physical service, but due to restrictions and keeping everyone safe, we're unfortunately not able to do that kind of stuff anymore. We thought that a big part of Leo, and Leo is a three-part acronym, which means leadership. Leadership is the first part. I'm pretty sure that was intentional. We wanted to focus on developing the leadership skills of our Leo Club members and Leos in line across the world. So we decided to host this series. Ever since then, we've had incredible guests, including the one that we'll be hearing from today. And so I hope that you all continue to join us, and please make sure that you register for the next session and join us again next week. Thank you so much, and back to you, Vihaan.
Our guest speaker for today will be PID Melvyn K. Bray from Whiting, New Jersey. He was elected to serve as a two-term director of Lions Club International at the association's 98th International Convention held in Honolulu, Hawaii, the June 26th through 30th, 2015. Director Bray is a retired bank vice president and regional manager. A member of the Toms River Lions Club since 1973, he has held many offices within the association, including club president, club treasurer, club secretary, club member chairperson, council secretary, cabinet treasurer, council chairperson, district peace poster contest chairperson, district LCIF chairperson, multiple district GMT coordinator, and region chairperson. He is also the executive director for the Lions Eye Research Foundation of New Jersey. In recognition of his service to the organization, Director Bray has received numerous awards, including the Club President Excellence Award, a Leadership Award, Senior Builder Key Award, Life Membership Award, and 3 International President Awards. He is also a Progressive Melvyn Jones Fellow. In addition to his Lions Club activities, Director Bray is active in numerous professional and community organizations, including the Sight and Handicap Foundation of Ocean City, Funds for the New Jersey Blind, and the New Jersey Camp for Blind Children. Director Bray and his wife, Ginny, also a Lion and Progressive Melvyn Jones Fellow, have 1 son, 1 daughter, and 3 grandsons. And now I'm going to turn things over to PID Melvyn Bray to speak to us.
Good morning, everyone. This is a pleasure to be here with you on this Sunday morning. You can see I'm all dressed like I'm going to church because that was actually already done. But it's been a pleasure to be able to help the Leos in their pursuit of helping and educating the Lions around the world. When I took on the job, I thought it was basically for the USA, but I realized today that they're telling me it's 200 people or so that will actually affect around the world. So this is a great opportunity to help more people as we do Lions helping Lions. Our topic today is public speaking. One of the things that people say to me, well, why do I even need to do that? Well, if you start thinking about it, you're going to need it because if you are afraid to get out of your shell and talk to people, you're always going to be on the side wall of the room with nobody talking to you because you're not willing to be engaging with them. So you need it for making friends. Big part of what you're going to be doing in the future, if you're a Leo, is you're going to be going to college, and at the same time, you might have to do personal interviews to get your applications approved for that particular college you choose. That's going to be a big part of talking to people. It's also very important for job interviews because during the job interview process, you're going to be asked to talk and answer questions by the person interviewing you at that particular time. You're going to probably make an impression within the first 35 seconds maybe a minute of that particular interview, even if it lasts 10 or 15 minutes. But the decision is going to come in that very first period. If you're not willing to speak up, you're not willing to answer their questions with more than a single word, you're not really going to be one of the top candidates for that position. So you need to be able to express yourself. As Leos, part of what you're learning for your leadership skills is when you want to lead the group, you have to be able to communicate the ideas that you have, and in some cases, convince people in your group that this is the right way to go. The presentation that you make is going to actually either make the project go forward, or it's going to make the project die at that point and not be approved by a board or the group that has to do that. So you're going to be seeing many applications, and you'll be getting a copy of the full presentation later on after this is completed. So we won't dwell on all of the different things that are necessary for that. Part of what you like to do when you go in to speak to a group is basically get in the middle of the group. Go around and talk to the people before you're actually going to make your presentation. So when everyone's gathering in the room, instead of going right to the head table, the podium, or wherever they're going to have you speaking or talking, you have to get out and talk to the individual people who are not at that head table and be able to use them. So when you go back up on the stage, you already have a couple of friends in that category of this particular group, whatever the topic is going to be for. And then you're going to be able to, as you're delivering your comments, be able to talk to Joe and look Joe straight in the eye and be able to get his attention. But you're also going to get the attention of other people who are there as well. You're going to need to do that over and over again through the conversation you have, whether it's a half an hour, 40 minutes, whether you had 10 minutes to prepare, or they told you 3 weeks ago that you're going to do this particular topic. So you have to be able to be mobile and adjust whatever you're going to do. But the biggest thing you want to do while you're out there is gauging the interest of the people who are in the room, see where if they have questions that they want to ask you, and they're going to ask them before the meeting so that maybe you can incorporate those into your particular presentation. So it's very important to get out into the group, not stand behind the podium all the time or a table or whatever you happen to be. So if you can do that, it's great. And the other part of it is when you get out there and you're conversing with these people as part of your program, if you're on a portable microphone, you make sure you take it with you and be able to have them respond or ask their questions for the group and answer on the spot. A lot of times the presentation is structured, you have to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to the end. And at the same time, you are hitting the topics or the questions that the people have an interest in. So you need to kind of gauge that, do some recognitions of what they're doing or asking as in your program, and it's going to satisfy a lot more people. You might have to be very careful, though, in some of your words. Sometimes we tend to just say something off the top of our head and don't realize that one or two of those words or that sentence might be inflammatory to some people in a group. Sometimes it's, I've seen in the past where we've had an individual president of my particular club decide that it was time to tell a joke, except it wasn't a joke that should have been told in a public setting. It was more like a joke that would have been told at the bar with two of your very closest friends and nobody else. And so that kind of created a situation because one of our members was actually very offended by the comment, and we calmed him down and he understood, but he did have to have a conversation with the president, which wasn't contentious, but at least the president stopped telling jokes like that in the future. So he learned a lesson, but it shouldn't have had to come to that way. So you have to be careful how you inspire people and get them to do the right thing. We've seen a lot of different kind of comments, and it seems like the politicians are the ones who can get away with saying anything they want. But we as presenters for Lions, we stay out of the politics. We don't get into those kind of things in our meetings, so we have to be careful with our words. And even with our prayers, we end up trying to use something that's very generic versus anything that goes to a particular religion or anybody's beliefs or thoughts. Hurtful speech, just something that doesn't belong in Lionism, it doesn't belong in the world. So we need to make sure that we aren't creating a situation where we're hurting somebody's feelings on a regular basis like that. If you believe in your topic, and that's one of the important things that's going to be able to sell your presentation, if you actually believe in what you're talking about and you've researched it enough and you really understand it, talk to other people about it, got some other perspectives, so you can use all of them as part of your program, you're going to be able to win over people and actually get the audience to believe in what you're saying. If you're all over wishy-washy with promises that you know you can't keep and people know you can't keep, they're not going to believe in what you're trying to sell them now because they've heard you before and they don't believe you already. So you have to be careful with those kind of things. When you're doing a presentation, and this is the first time I'm doing one of these on a Zoom type or on stream here, it's kind of hard to gauge which is the right way to do this because this is the only method we have. I was asked if you wanted to show all the slides and have the slides available as we were making the speech. And I answered no, because I'm probably not going to stick 100% to the schedule. So you'll be putting up things that they're going to be getting confused as I jump over the points, but you'll get all of that later on. But how do you do the best part of it? Best presentation is whether you're going to be doing a lecture, flip chart, PowerPoint, videos, printed handouts, props, a whole mix of the above. You kind of need to know all of that stuff well in advance so you can decide how you best want to present to this particular group. And the people that are using, usually your host, can kind of guide you as to what works best with the particular group because they've done this 13 times before. And so they would have a really good idea of how to do this. So you have to do that. If you're like me and you're following the PowerPoint, sometimes I get ahead of it and I forget to push that little button to flip it up. So you need somebody who's working with you and been trained, so to speak, to flip the page at this point because you're going to be going on to something else. The gauging of your audience, you have to figure out if they're answering questions or not. As I traveled around to 44 states in 2 years on the board, each one of my presentations was very different. And someone said to my wife one time, well, I think you heard this enough after your second year that you could probably give his whole presentation. And she just laughed and said, not a chance. It wasn't because she couldn't do it. It was because most of my presentations were geared for that particular group, and none of them were actually 100% repeated so that she could follow the same thing in every group because they're not the same. Your audience is always the same. They always have different expectations. They have different questions than other groups do. And so you have to kind of gear it to what they're doing. So as you go through your groups and you're trying to gauge the audience, it's going to help you to zero in on what you want to talk about. You can have one or two particular topics. Most of you will know what Lions Club's International Foundation is about, but at least 10 minutes of my conversation every time I presented, that's the one part that she could probably do because I did it probably in 80% of my presentations for that 2-year period. Questions and answers are always interesting because people will come up and ask you a question that you may not have prepared for. So if you really don't know your topic and you're just following off of your notes and that's all you've got in your bag of tricks to answer a question, you might be stumped and you might look kind of foolish, but there's always an out. If you don't actually know the answer and you're not 100% sure of an answer, don't give it. Tell them that you will get back to them and make sure that you do get back to them with the answer, because that's very important if you want to have them trusting in what you've said or your whole presentation. So make sure you get back to it. Sometimes you can have somebody in the group Google it up, look up on LCI, and the way we can get information all the time, and get the answer for you and then be able to express it to the people. And sometimes you actually have to wait until Monday or Tuesday and come back and get an answer to them at that point. How long do you have to sell the audience? Generally, you have about 1.5 minutes. Your first 30 seconds, again, like an interview process, is very, very important. You get past that quickly if you do the group going around, engaging them early, introducing yourself, talking to individuals, getting the knowledge of who you can contact or call on. And sometimes that works into, instead of you just presenting, is that you get to ask somebody else their question and let them answer what their question is, and let the discussion start with the people and get them engaged that way. So you need to work the room a lot of the time. It's been said many times that, you walk in the first time when you're doing a thought or a question or a point that you want to make, you look at Joe in the room that you met earlier and just make sure that you don't take your eyes off of Joe until you finish that point. That's a very important thing, but you need more than Joe. If you keep going back to Joe every time, people get bored with what you and Joe are having a private conversation about. So you need to move it around the room. The language that you're going to use while you're in a conversation with folks is always going to be something that has to be where they understand, the recipient, the audience actually understands what you're doing. If you use, and I did this a couple of times with the previous program back in 2015, and I was speaking to a group of Leos here in New Jersey, and I used some really old, maybe 30-year-old expressions on purpose to see how they would react to it. They had no idea what my reference was. And you sometimes see that in some of the game shows when they ask a question that's many times dated, and the younger people have no clue because they didn't grow up in that era to know what you're saying. So you have to make sure that the language is specific to the group that you're talking about so that you can get to them the answer that they need and also understand their questions when they're asking them, because we all have to stay updated and educated on new things every day. There's a lot of different reasons that you want to do public speaking. Politicians will tell you it's to get voted, whatever they promise you. But businesses many times are doing it because they want to turn around and sell their product. They want to persuade people or to motivate people to be convinced of something that they're being sold by this particular company is going to be better than somebody else's. And then there's always the entertainer people who fulfill our society's needs to be able to adjust and socialize with people and draw us together. So there's different kind of reasons why you want to do that. Most of the time, you're going to find that the purpose is given to you pretty much by the people who are the host. So they'll give you the idea of which way they want to go. And if they don't, you need to make sure you get back to them and say, okay, I'm going to do the program, but how do you want me to present it? What is the purpose of the basics? What do you want me to support for you to present these people so that they can be successful, to accept what you're selling them, accept the idea that you want them to support, whatever it's going to be. So you need to definitely know what that purpose is going to be in order for you to be successful in what you're doing on the sales pitch. Like everything else, it's like a book. Public speaking, you have to start out with the opening, you have a body, and you have a conclusion. So it says the first 30 seconds is the most critical, which I've already said to you, but it's also that you can do some things very well. When you're opening, when you want to open, a lot of times people will recite a poem or a phrase from somebody very, very important in the world in the past or current. And other times it's somebody who's going to turn around, and my lead person, when I was vice governor, my lead person was as governor, always had jokes in his pocket. Lots of golf jokes, bunch of other kinds of jokes, but mostly golf jokes. He could recite them. He could tell you the punchline. He could make the people laugh. I followed him the next year, and they said, okay, where's your joke? and I tried to tell the joke that I knew, and I couldn't remember the punchline properly, so the joke fell flat on the floor. So after that, I tried to joke one more time and said, okay, for the next year, for this I'm governor, there's going to be no more jokes from me. But I always could call on Jim and say, Jim, we need a joke, so can you tell something? So don't be afraid to use other people in the audience to help you get through what you need to get done with your particular group. Let's see. I'm just going through the 3 pages of those 3 things that make up beginning, post, and the end. There's a bunch of tips that I definitely like to talk about. And you'll get your tips from people that are with you, who are your mentors. When I was running around as a governor and a vice governor and just a spokesperson for one of the different groups that I actually represent, people would tell me different things. And, one of the most important ones is don't do things that are distracting. And by that, I mean, don't have a pocket full of change and then decide that you're going to put your hand in your pocket. And because you're nervous, you're jiggling your hand and your coin is jiggling and making sounds and distracting to the people. Don't be willing to stay behind the podium. Put your hands on both sides of the podium and just stand there and keep talking and talking and talking and talking, because then the people feel like you're not really engaging with them. You're just doing a rote project like you were a robot. That's not what they're looking for. There's other things that, like we talked about with looking around the room, being engaged by talking to the people. Those are all very important things that you need to do, because as you're going through and you're willing to do that, you're going to find someone in the audience that's going to have a very negative question or be very negative about even the group that's you're actually meeting with and complaining about a lot of different things. You're going to have to politely answer the question or refer that question off to somebody else in the group who's actually knowledgeable if it's something you have no idea about. But if it's something that you're, like me, I was talking about Lions International, and some people would talk about negative things with International, you'd have to have the answer in order to both sell the current group that actually believes in what you're saying and also to try and persuade that person. And sometimes you get to the point where rather than getting argumentative with a person or combative with a person, you just have to be able to say, okay, that's not something we can talk about here. Refer it back to the district governor or whoever's the person leading as your host and say, they're going to have to deal with that because I'm not from your group here and they're going to have to handle it. And we're not going to talk about it because it's not something that we should be here. So you have to turn around and be able to work with the group, hand off things like that, and stay out of trouble as much as you can. Everybody probably has some issues with voice. One of the biggest things I will tell you is, even though you think you have a strong voice, the person in the back of that room is not going to necessarily hear your strong voice. They may have a hearing problem. They just might have a fan or the air conditioner blowing through the vent coming up and making noise in their ears, so they can't quite hear you. So if you have a microphone, make sure you use the microphone. It doesn't matter how loud your voice is. It makes it a lot clearer for everybody in the room. Keeps them all engaged. Your body movements are kind of important. Years ago, I was told that I was doing the chicken dance while I was talking to people in a 4-hour seminar. And part of it was always nerves. Part of it was just something that I didn't realize was doing. And we took a video one day of my making a presentation, and I played it back, and that's my hands were just flopping all over the place. You would have thought I was a wide receiver that didn't know where the football was or something. So you got to watch out some of those things, and you learn that over time. Do you want to turn around and have a speech that you're going to read word for word? Well, that's great if you're going to have it published in a newspaper or something else and you want to distribute the word for word. But when you're making the actual speech, you start out a lot of times writing all your thoughts down, And by the time you get to the third or fourth time you're making a presentation like that, you learn that having a single little note or a single word on a page and going down could be something that you need to do. Just as a quick aside, many years ago, when I was actually still working, one of my assistant managers said to me one time in a meeting, well, you know, your agendas are always so long that it takes us way too long to get through them. So I decided to be cute at one of the meetings, and I got a little 2.5 by 2.5 inch Post-it. I wrote down 14 single words, and it still took the 3.5 hours we were supposed to and required to be at the meeting. So you can get around their complaints by doing silly things sometimes, but they never ask for a short agenda again. Dressing for the part is important. You have to be able to do that. Today, I'm all dressed up as a director because I'm supposed to always present this way. You see that our hosts are dressed up with shirts and ties and stuff, so that they're presenting as hosts as they properly should. But I'm sure a bunch of you that I can't see are all out there with shirts, just a shirt or a blouse or whatever, and normal street clothes kind of thing, and not dressed up in suits and ties. And we don't expect that from anybody. We're we're getting away from that a lot in Lions. And so you can see that we're trying to stay as modern as the younger crowd of members that we have are influencing us and saying, this makes it more appealing to younger members, so you need to do this. Are we still on?
Interesting question.
I'm trying to get rid of that. All right, can you still hear me, Otis?
Yes, we can, PID email.
Not sure I understand.
Oh, how do I get rid of that? Okay, but get rid of her real quick. There we go. Am I back now? I would imagine I am.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, something happened and Siri got on here and wanted to do the presentation for me. Okay. How much more time do we have? Not much. Appearance, voice, body movements. So one of your biggest jobs while you're making your presentation, and people are going to be asking even at the end of it, as we will here today, is going to be getting the involvement of the people by listening to them to hear what they're actually saying. Most of the time, we're presenting a topic, we kind of know it thoroughly. Someone starts to answer, and by the time they've got their third word out, we're already thinking about the response before we heard the rest of the question. Make sure that you don't do that. Make sure that you let them get through their whole question and really listen to their question, because at the end, they actually might have something different than what's in your head, because you're not them and they're not you. So you need to turn around and listen to the people. When you have them listening and then they're asking questions, I'm the type of person who is, you've got the question, say it now while you're asking it, and I'll get back to where I have to be later on, but I'm going to answer your question because I'm really there for you. You as a speaker are really there for the people in your audience. You need to be able to respond to them when they have a need versus putting it off later. Someone forgets the question, you get run out of time or something else, and they don't get their question answered. And then it's either catch-up time, telephone tag, email tag, whatever, but it takes a while to get back to them if you ever get to do that. Okay. Probably the last thing I have to tell you is there's a lot of tips at the end of the program you're going to receive later on, which talk about overcoming nervousness. The best way to overcome nervousness is to just really, really, really know your topic. So that if I were to talk about public speaking, I don't have a problem with this at all. I kind of know most of what I have on these notes without having to read them and to go verbatim for what I have in my notes. When I presented a number of times, and sometimes you're in a group that's doing several different seminars at different times, I would go and have my program that they asked me to do for 45 minutes or whatever. And then the next program, the particular presenter didn't show up or couldn't make it, stuck in a snowstorm, whatever. And so they come to you and say, okay, he was scheduled for an hour presentation. Can you fill in some of the time? So you need to be able to adapt, adjust your schedules and whatever else that you're talking about, and fill in with other topics. So you can never just be knowledgeable in the one topic you're presenting. You need to have a good array of things that you can actually work with. There's other techniques about breathing and doing a lot of other things that you actually use. Making eye contact with the individuals is always a helpful one. As long as you've met that person, it's very, very good. And sometimes that person will really add a great value to the presentation that you're making, because they're going to bring up the points that really need to be discussed for that particular group. So always be willing to use those people and let them speak when they can. There's no cookie cutter presentation that you can actually give that's going to fit every single group that you're going to present to. So you have to be able to tailor it to that particular group. And I can't stress that enough, because doing seminars for groups up to 400 and some people at a time, you really have to be able to answer an awful lot of questions about that particular project. At this time, you're going to turn around and you'll see, when you get the link, you'll see additional resources for Toastmasters International, the Lions Learning Center website, and also the International Learning Center as well. So you're going to have a lot of things given to you, or a lot of pages. It's 21 pages long, and hopefully that will help you to make your presentations in the future. It's been my pleasure to be here with the lead with a vision group, Lion Ojas Chitnis, and President Vihaan Easwar as our host. So I'm turning it back to them.
Thank you very much, PID Mel. Now, does anyone have any questions for PID Mel? Anyone in the audience have anything they'd like to ask him?
Vihaan, I think it typically should be showing up at the bottom of the screen, but I think we're having a couple issues with that. So I see a question here. How can Leos become better prepared to speak off of the cuff?
Well, the speak off the cuff is kind of open-ended. So I'm going to think that they're talking about Leos and the Leo group, and they're going to just have to really go through that whole topic of being a Leo. What does it mean? Developing some kind of a response, like an elevator speech to talk to people, and being able to answer questions more in depth than just a quick elevator speech. You're going to have a research time you're going to have to do, and over a period of time, I'm going to say, if you do a few speeches over a 4 or 5 month period, you're going to have enough to answer most people's questions, because you're either going to have received those questions from people, but that's going to be the kind of thing that you really have to develop by doing it, practicing, writing things down. I used to write 14 pages worth of notes to start, to see all the things I want to do. And by the time I get to the podium, I'm down to I have a little index card with just the things I have to talk about. The rest of the thoughts are in my head, so I don't have to worry about making a mistake. The biggest mistake anybody can make is answering a question or saying something that you don't know it to be true. You always want to make sure that everything you say is 100% true, and that's going to keep people coming back and saying, I really like what you said, and thank you for willing to answer that question and get back to me.
Okay, thank you for that question. If nobody else has any questions, then I will turn things back over to Leo. Oh, turns out we have another question. My bad about that. What is your advice for people dealing with stage fright?
What I just did. Take a deep breath, walk out on stage, think about your presentation, how you're going to start it, and just start. Look at that person that you've already identified earlier if you can. If you haven't had an opportunity to go out and do that, just go up to the podium or wherever you're speaking from and start your presentation. You've already experienced it. You've thought about it. You wrote it down. You hopefully practiced it a couple of times. And so when you get out there, you just do what you have to do. And then you can have all the nerves you want afterwards because you finished and you did a great job. But just don't let it override your thoughts. Just get in there, tell them what you came there for, and you'll be fine.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful, very helpful. I'm sure a lot of us can benefit from that.
All right, Vihaan, you're turning it back over to me, correct?
Correct.
I'll take that to mean yes. So thank you all for coming once again. I think that, each and every week we continue to get stronger and stronger, and we hope that you'll join us again next week. Once again, this is Lead with a Vision, our weekly leadership series, and I'd like to talk very briefly about some sad news that we received earlier this week. Someone who I was privileged to learn from, someone who I was privileged to know very well, PDG Lion Chris Lewis, who was a very dedicated Lions leader from Canada, a Global Action Team area leader. Unfortunately, he lost his battle with cancer, and he unfortunately passed away last week. And I don't say that just to reflect on his life. Of course, being an incredible leader, I was very deeply affected by that. But what I do want to touch on is how we as Lions and Leos come together. In honor of Lion Chris Lewis, we set up a fundraiser in his memory for LCIF. And the goal was, I think, about $6,000, and we far exceeded that. And I'd like to congratulate everyone for really working to preserve the memory of Lion Chris Lewis so that we can continue, so that his memory can live on within our association. I thought that was very powerful and important to share. And then I'd like to turn it back over to Vihaan to just close us out for today and thank all of you for joining us. Thank Lion PID Mel for joining us on this session. And thank you, Leo Vihaan, for hosting the session.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo Otis. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for attending this session. I would like to thank you, PID Mel, for your very insightful advice with regards to public speaking. I'm sure a lot of us could use that information. And thank you, Leo Otis, for joining me in hosting this session. And we will see all of you for next week's episode of Lead with a Vision. Thank you.
Have a great week.
All right, that ends the session. Thank you all for joining us. And once again, please join us for our next leadership session, which is on the topic of what is leadership, episode 14, hosted by, I think it's obscured right now, but past Assistant Governor Gayla Wills, who actually has been just nominated as a 2021-2023 Leo Advisory Panelist representing Constitutional Area 7. Please join us. Hope to see you then.